The silence in our kitchen carried the heavy, pressurized stillness of a sealed vault. We sat across from one another at the same table where, only hours earlier, we had finalized the last payment for our wedding venue. 3 months remained until the ceremony. Every detail had been arranged. Every logistical box had been checked. Then Miranda spoke. Her voice was flat and emotionless, stripped of any warmth. She told me she couldn't marry me. She said she needed to discover who she was outside of our relationship. There were no tears, no visible struggle. She moved with mechanical precision, packing a suitcase as casually as if she were preparing for a weekend getaway. When she placed the engagement ring on the granite countertop, the sharp clatter of metal against stone became the only punctuation mark in the room. I didn't ask her to stay. I didn't demand answers. I simply noted the exact time she left. Every canceled project requires a final audit to determine how losses will be distributed. Logic is often the only structure that remains standing when the emotional foundations of a life collapse without warning. The next morning, I followed my routine. I made coffee, I worked a full day, I maintained the professional composure my colleagues had come to expect. That evening, I opened a spreadsheet. When a business dissolves, assets and liabilities must be reconciled. Our relationship was no different. I gathered every contract related to the wedding. The venue deposit alone was $5,000 and entirely non-refundable. The photographer, florist, and DJ each held retainers that would never be recovered. Then I reviewed our joint bank statements. That was when I found charges for luxury skincare products and a wellness retreat she had never told me about. Every transaction was documented. Every dollar was recorded. Logic is the most effective defense against betrayal. It removes emotion from the equation and leaves behind only facts. By midnight, I had my answer. The total stood at $19,400 in shared losses and unauthorized spending. I wasn't angry. I felt a professional obligation to accuracy. These weren't merely numbers on a screen. They represented choices she had made using money that came entirely from our shared future. Accountability was the only reasonable path forward. The following evening, I sent Miranda a detailed summary. I titled it Distribution of Shared Liabilities, Not an Act of Revenge. The document divided the costs into two categories. I assigned her 50% responsibility for the wedding losses and full responsibility for the personal expenses she had concealed. The final amount came to $9,700. I sent it by both courier and email. Her reaction was immediate. She called within minutes, her voice sharp with panic and frustration. She accused me of being cold, detached, and calculating. I listened patiently until she exhausted herself. Then I calmly explained that freedom from a relationship does not erase financial responsibility. She had been the primary driver behind many of the expenses she was now attempting to abandon. She insisted she wouldn't pay. I told her I wasn't seeking permission. I was simply documenting obligations. The call ended with an abrupt click, but the facts remained exactly where they had always been. She viewed our relationship as an emotion that had faded. I viewed it as an agreement that had been broken. Numbers have no loyalty. They simply tell the truth. Miranda soon attempted to reshape the narrative online. She posted lengthy messages about escaping control, reclaiming her independence, and finding peace. In her version of events, I became the villain who measured love through spreadsheets and receipts. My phone quickly filled with hostile messages from mutual friends who accepted her story without question. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself publicly. Instead, I sent complete documentation to Daniel and Leah, the two people whose judgment I trusted most. I included receipts from her secret retreat and bank records showing the $3,000 transfer she made before walking away. Truth doesn't require volume. It only requires evidence. A few days later, her friend Hannah called to criticize me. I asked a simple question. Had she seen the ledger? Did she know where the money for Miranda's new wardrobe had come from? The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. The truth was beginning to spread. Almost overnight, the social media posts disappeared. Her carefully filtered version of reality couldn't survive direct exposure to facts. People slowly began to understand that the real victim wasn't the person posting online. It was the person left holding the bills and carrying the burden of deception. 3 weeks later, a colleague named Michael Reynolds approached me at a bar. He admitted he had been seeing Miranda for several months. She had told him we were already separated and that I was financially abusive. He believed every word until he saw the invoice I had sent, which had quietly circulated among mutual friends. Only then did he realize he wasn't a new partner. He was a landing pad prepared long before her exit. That same night, he ended things with her. I shook his hand without bitterness. He had been used as a tool in her plan, just as I had been used as its financial foundation. She hadn't left to find herself. She left because she believed a replacement was already waiting. When the truth surfaced, that carefully constructed future collapsed. She was left with debt, a damaged reputation, and no victim narrative left to hide behind. The affair had been the missing variable in the equation. Once it appeared, everything finally made sense. She hadn't simply walked away from a wedding. She had abandoned a life she had already betrayed long before she left. The resolution came slowly, through a steady return to order. Eventually, Miranda appeared at my front door. She asked me to help repair her credit because vendors had begun sending unpaid balances to collections. She couldn't secure an apartment and claimed she was drowning beneath the consequences. I told her that independence includes accepting responsibility for one's choices. I didn't pay. Eventually, her parents settled the debts to avoid public embarrassment. But it wasn't a gift, it was a loan. Today, my life is stable, orderly, predictable in the best possible way. I'm seeing a woman named Claire who values honesty and transparency. Recently, I saw Miranda sitting alone in a restaurant. She looked like someone who had finally found herself and discovered she didn't like what she found. I don't carry bitterness. I'm not pursuing justice. I simply held my ground in reality until the truth became impossible to ignore. Finding yourself is not an escape, it's a reckoning, and in the end, the numbers always balance. I am neither the villain in her story nor the hero of my own. I am simply the man who kept the receipts and preserved the truth of our broken, shared history.